Welcome back to my pronunciation channel. I've noticed over the years, while I have not been producing more videos, that there are quite a few English teachers that use my channel to learn how to teach pronunciation better. And I wanted to put together a video of some simple techniques you can use in the general ESL or EFL classroom for classes that are not specifically pronunciation. There are many things you can do while using a regular textbook that doesn't even have particular exercises with pronunciation. My estimate is that about half of all problems with comprehensibility can be avoided if your students just learn to use their voice better, meaning louder and open their mouth and be more correct with their tongue, but especially just open up the lips and let the sound come forth instead of blocking it by letting the lips be together like this and speaking through their teeth. It becomes very difficult to understand. So encourage them to speak louder and to articulate more. For example, I try to incorporate exercises in such a way that there's some distance between the students, either between tables or when they stand, to not be too close, and that forces them to raise their voices. Or you can do things like finger puppets to help the students get out of their shell, pretend to be somebody else, and that will gain confidence in speaking louder. Another thing to think about is very often when you're teaching pronunciation and students don't know how to imitate it, that often a teacher will just kind of repeat it again and just say it and expect them to hear the difference. But very often the brains don't work that way, and it's important that you show how to do it, that you become aware. You might need to educate yourself a little bit about how to produce an R or an L, or rounding and not rounding lips for vowels, etc. Something that helps with this is to do a very quick facial warm-up at the beginning of class. I do this very specifically in all my pronunciation classes. But if you have like a listening and speaking class where there's going to be a lot of emphasis on speaking and the need for good pronunciation, having the students start with just opening their mouth, like, so that they can feel the muscles that maybe they don't use normally so much. Also strengthening their tongue, so it makes it easier for them to find the locations in their mouth. So for example, stretch it straight out, up, down, side to side. And the first time they do it, they feel embarrassed, but after that, they get used to it very quickly. And it takes less than a minute for sure, so it doesn't take any time at all. It's really important to focus on how students speak, almost more so than what they're saying, what grammar they're using, or what vocabulary. If they're learning, let's say, small talk questions, it's not just the words they put together, but the intonation they use, and to really model that. Here's an example. Let's say you're teaching grammar, and there's a little unit on modals, and here must be. And as you're working with them, you can add in the emotions that would be there. You must be tired. You must be excited. That must be so boring, etc. And the students really, really enjoy doing that. They laugh a lot. We laugh a lot in class, and that is a good way for them to gain confidence and start to listen for intonation. Usually the intonation really improves once you start playing with emotions. So in this example, you have maybe something you do as a pair activity, but you can first model it in class. We finally finished our project. You guys must be so happy. So doing different emotions like that will really make it more interesting in class in general, and it will help their pronunciation. Sometimes the conversations and dialogues in textbooks are quite boring, and I teach one multiskills level 1 class, beginner class, and they will have dialogues like the one on the screen here. And what I do to even bother to work on it is to make fun of it a little bit, like, "Doctor, I have a backache." "A backache?" "Yes, a backache." "Take a painkiller." I mean, that's literally the type of dialogues to practice that my students have. But when we do this, it just makes it a lot more fun, and they gain confidence in their speaking. Another important way to help students with their pronunciation is to do either echo reading or choral reading with them. I usually do echo reading, where I read part of a sentence first, usually between punctuation, to get nice thought groups together, and they repeat. And with time, they usually really learn some good sentence stress, which words to focus on, and also the pronunciation. And the whole process of reading it, hearing it, saying it really engages the brain better, and it will help them remember. So as you're working in a textbook, let's say they have a text about computers or the internet, and they have lists. So you could look out for compound nouns, for example, and teach them to go high on the first one and low on the second one. Software, keyboard, hard drive. And this should be a big difference too. So if they just do software, it's not quite enough. And this will help comprehensibility a lot. Here's another example. Let's say that there is a text about work, and they have a list of work vocabulary. A lot of them, office assistant, can be many different words, and like workplace, break room, break time will help them to pronounce those correctly. Another type of pronunciation would be how to pronounce phrasal verbs. And we have so many in English, of course. You're going to start kind of low on the verb and go quickly, and then focus on the word after the verb, which is usually a preposition or an adverb. Come in, go back. So by focusing on certain types of words in the vocabulary list can really help. Another type of syllable stress you could teach would be how to pronounce names. The general rule is that we go the highest on the last part. The Rocky Mountains, Colorado Springs, Central Park, and the United States. Also for abbreviations, we follow the same pattern. So the United States, the US, the DMV, UPS, etc. So as they come along in texts, you can focus on that. Here are some more pronunciation exercises when you work on grammar. For example, when they learn future with will, you teach them that they usually contract it with l. But students often don't hear the difference between I help you and I'll help you. So you can practice that with them and really help them to know what to do with the tongue, and have them do differences between I help you, I'll help you, and see if they can hear the difference. Here's a type of exercise that I do with students quite often, even in the multiskills classroom, is I give them two things that sound very similar. I have milk, or I'll have milk. First, they need to learn to hear the difference. So if I say I'll have milk, they will answer, it will be just a minute. Or if I say I have milk, they answer, I won't buy any then. And then you can see if they can hear the difference. Another example is, for example, I like and I'd like. Most of my students say I like when they really mean I would like. They're ordering something, and they don't quite understand the difference between I like coffee and I'd like some coffee. So here is one. You teach them how to make that stop. I like to go shopping. I like to go shopping. I like to go shopping. And if they hear me say, I'd like to go shopping, then they say, let's go. If I say, I like to go shopping, they can answer, so do I, or me too, or something like that. And after a while, they start to choose. I'll tell a student, choose A or B for number one, and then we'll see what we hear. Another kind of pronunciation exercise you can do is, let's say you're focusing on question words. You're doing a chapter in a grammar book by question words, and you can teach them to stress kind of high the question word. How do you get to school? Usually there are two stresses. How do you get to school? How far you live from school. If you have a phrase like how far or how much money, it's the last one that's going to be the highest. And this is really helpful for students to learn how to ask questions. You can do intonation practice with yes and no questions and WH questions. So yes and no questions usually start really low until they hit the stress. For example, are you interested? And then it goes straight up. Is he working? While a WH question usually starts kind of high, like a ski slope, and goes down and comes up a little bit again on the next stress. What should we do? Where did you put the bag? And that will help with sentence stress and intonation as well. Students love to learn reduced speech, especially these spoken questions like don't you, did you, didn't you? And they find it very interesting. So doing that every so often can be very helpful. You can put together little dialogues that they can practice. As far as grammar, learning to pronounce irregular verbs can be really important, not just learning the spelling. And I have about a dozen videos that show different pronunciation patterns for irregular verbs, all three forms. And I'll put some links in the description for that. I'll put some links also for a video, a little bit longer video on the color vowel chart and schwa. Those, I think, are really good for you to learn as a teacher, so you can incorporate them also in your classroom. Thanks for listening. Thank you. Please like and subscribe. Bye.